committee work under. We've had one workshop and having another one on the 9th of May just to finalise it. And we've sent a copy of the draft charter to Ngāti Kahungunu Incorporated on request of a couple of members for their input as well. I'm just mindful when I'm at these committee meetings that the four tai whenua at various crossroads in terms of they'll eventually morph into something with the treaty groups. But at the moment, I believe that they're doing a good job of involving marae and hapu. But in Central Hawke's Bay in particular, I'm just mindful that somewhere along the track, the two will merge into one body rather than two bodies. There's a couple of matters there that we discussed, and we had a little bit of guidance from the three councillors that attend the Maori committee members. The first one was the relevance of hapu plans, and one of the new members from Ahuriri asked the meeting as to how seriously does the council take hapu management plans? And the chair of this committee gave an answer. Would you just like to reiterate what you said, sir?
I've got to remember what I said.
You said they took a lot of notice.
Yeah, no, I think there was some concern that from the hapu, and it's you can understand that. That they do this immense amount of work, and they gather their people around their marae, and they finally get a report, and they give us the report, and it goes into a bottom drawer. And there has been a bit of that happening, and we just need to make sure that it doesn't in the future, and reassure them that we are going to be a lot more proactive in dealing with hapu and their particularly rohi that they have, and making sure that it integrates, because it generally does, and in fact generally they are in advance of our aspirations, works with into what our staff are recommending to us. So try to reassure them of that.
And also I think there's the misconception that you do a management plan and immediately the councils will change the work plans accordingly. I think they need to realise very early in the piece that this has to be worked into long-term plans, and also the need, and Kohu Pātiki took 3 years to form their hapu plan, and the marae down the road says, who the hell are they to start telling us what to do with the river? So I think there's a little bit of work to be done amongst themselves as well. And the second thing is the query was asked of the three council members. We have one of the members who has been a member of the Maori committee for a couple of years. He is the Māori liaison officer for Wairoa resigned, and that member is in an interim position, and he has applied for the job, and he's likely to get the Māori liaison officer. The question was asked, is he still able to sit on the Maori committee, even though he's will be employed by the Wairoa District Council? Could we see some guidance or suggestions on that, because it's not in the Constitution, in the Charter?
I think we agreed that we were happy with that at the meeting.
Yeah, I just wanted that formally.
Yeah, we did agree.
And the other matter was there was a community day at Whangawehi, which is at Mahia. They have received national awards for their efforts, the community plantings. It's an excellent project, and I'd like to thank the two council members, Bailey and Graham, that went to the community day. Councillor Fenton has been there 2 or 3 times. The project is ongoing. They're continually seeking funding. They're getting funding through Ngāwhena Rāhui, this council and a number of other agencies. Excellent project, which fits in well with the council works up there.
I'd just like to add a bit to that. The best thing about the day was on the way back we took Bill Blake back to Hawke's Bay, and to Hiratonga, so to speak, and he pointed out his favourite paua hunting spot.
He said that you'll give me those notes afterwards.
I'll buy you lunch, Paul.
And last year we had a pilot scheme of taking 2 meetings a year out to the outlying tai whenua of Tamatea and Wairoa, and it's decided that we'll carry on this year. So the next Maori committee meeting is on Tuesday, the 13th of June, and just as a reminder for the chairman to get the day right so he can attend it this time.
Yeah.
Sorry, at Mahia. Apparently we're being hosted for a week out there.
So it wasn't that day, it was another day. It was the 20th of June.
I just tried to get you there a week early.
Yeah. And the Lions play the Chiefs that night, so we'll be getting back in time for that. So it would be, I think it'd be really good meeting if, for councillors to attend if they could, that meeting.
I think just the presence of the councillors at the meetings, it just sort of makes them, as a Maori saying, you know, kei te whakarangatira I a mātou, which means your presence makes us feel chieftainous. And if the councillors were to go to Mahia, other councillors as well, it just gives the locals a bit of a lift.
Yeah, I do have a question. I resigned from this committee a few years back because I questioned the value of my participation in it. As long as I've been around here, I don't think I have ever seen a written report from this committee. And I question, why is that the case? Why is this the only committee in this structure of governance structure of ours that doesn't seem to be significant enough to actually grace us with a written report from time to time?
I can't answer that. I'll leave it
The
to
question, does that written report come from the chairman or the staff, of which we have none?
You mean a report from the meeting, Tom, of the...
I thought that
You do expect to get a report from the Environment Committee, don't you?
Oh, we do. We get one similar to
We
this.
don't have any of those meetings anymore, do we, Tom?
but I thought Mr. Mohi was being culturally very sensitive, and according to with his law, which Maori is an oral tradition.
No, I don't. I think actually you're right. Let's lift the game up a little bit, because there was a lot of really important stuff, and the last Māori committee I thought was really good, because there's a lot of things happening in Tāna Te Whenua and in the Māori community that are really interesting, and we get it in those those meetings, things which I can talk to you about, and I think a report would probably be quite useful to everybody.
Chairman, there's a...
And you're welcome to attend too, Tom.
There's an escalating gap between the standards and participation and expectation we have, for example, of the Regional Planning Committee as compared to this committee.
Councillor Wilson?
Well, they're two different things, obviously. Part of the importance and attraction of a tai whenua-based committee is the mahi is done to take the word back to the people. So it goes back to the marae, goes back to the hapu, and their issues can then come forward and be presented. In regards to the written report, law aside, this accurately reflects what was discussed on the day, and we are now going to pass this as a council resolution. Well, it's going to go through a council resolution process. I don't want to predetermine myself to say it's going to pass or otherwise. But let's not forget that there is agendas and minutes and things that all councillors are privy to on the way. So I'm not quite sure what the issue is here.
Well, the issue is if you were not sitting at this table today, listening to this verbal report, or addicted to the video recording of this meeting, you would have this is what you would read. This is what you would find in the public record as to what transpired at the last Maori Committee meeting.
It's not quite correct because there's a set of minutes to go through, which is also for public record.
Could I add one other thing, which I think has been missed here, is when you go and look at the, for example, the corporate strategic, you'll find that the council has a substantial number of staff devoted to the work around that. When you go to the Tom's Green team over there, there's a substantial number of staff devoted to that. When you look at what is the staff resource for this council around the Maori Committee, you'll find it is next to zero. Now, if we want to have detailed reports, more reports, then that requires resources. At the moment, the main resource of the Maori Committee is Mike Mohi, and that's it, to be honest about it. I thought that I get what Councillor Belford is raising, and it's a fair enough point. If we want to have more detailed written material, well then we put the resources in to make it happen. Something I would support wholeheartedly.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I think I agree with Councillor Belford. So what I would like to see is the minutes of the Māori Committee attached as appendix, and I'd like your permission to hire a secretary. Probably would be a Pākehā girl. And what salary range are we thinking?
Thank you, Mr. Mohi. Pause, guys. I think, Councillor Barr, if we did, Belford, sorry, if we attach the minutes of both of these, or they haven't been approved, they'll be unapproved minutes, would that help? And we have a really good, the minutes are pretty good and pretty solid, so would that help you? So we might look at trying to do that in the future.
Just along those lines, Mr. Chair, finally, I did peruse the minutes and sent them back to Judy. So, you know, they would have been ready today if that's part of the process.
We will look to do that in the future. Does anyone else got any questions or comments? Otherwise, we have a mover to accept the Maori Committee report. One, seconder. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Motion is carried. Accept. So we have now item 13, which Mr. Jury, is he here? Is he?
No, we have Manton.
Oh, we have Manton. Thank you, Manton. Right.
Great.
All yours, Manton.
Good, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, Paul is away today, so you are stuck with me. So hopefully we can answer everything that you want answers on. Just before we get started, I've got a bit of a public service announcement. Just the IRD have updated their withholding tax regime a little bit from the 1st of April. So for you as a councillor, we deduct tax, and we have to deduct tax at 33%. Unless you've got an exemption, which is quite hard to get. They're now, believe it or not, making things easier, and you can apply to have any rate you wish from 10% up to that 33%. So if it suits your circumstance, your other business interests and everything else you've got going on, this is probably a good time of year to have a look at that for your past year's tax. If that is something that's beneficial or might be for you, come and see one of us in finance, and we'll let you know what you need to do there, or can help you have a look at what might be the most beneficial way for yourselves. So that's my public deed done. Into the finance report. So we are, well, we're past 9 months through the year now, but this is the report for the 9 months up to the end of March, and every year we, at that time, have a look at a reforecast of where we think we'll be for the end of the financial year, so coming up end of June. Each of the management team look at the areas, we look at overheads and everything else involved with that to get a feel of where we will be and give you an idea of any surprises that may be popping up and how we can cover those and so on. So the paper has hopefully outlined that well. I think probably the best place to start is in section A of the attachments, probably sets it out best, and that's on page 45. Shows our reforecasting structure for the year. We did do one quite early into the year, the first 3 months, which took into account the water investigation that we were going through at the time, and a little bit of difference in our regional income funding due to delays in the RWS and extra interest and things covering there. So we had done a little one at that stage, and that, if you recall, added slightly to our bottom line surplus deficit. So there was an extra deficit of 68,000 at that point, which was to be covered through the profit from the last financial year. So that was our starting point for this reforecast. We've then got that column B, which is our reforecast that we've just done. So this is our fine-tooth comb going through area by area, looking at different sections there and where we think we'll be at the end. So I guess the bottom line to that is right in that bottom right corner is that 143 deficit to where we thought we'd be as this the bottom line after our exercise. And there's various reasons for that, which we've detailed in length. Hopefully you've had the time to read that. Otherwise we can do so now. I'll take your guidance on that, Mr. Chairman. If there's any questions that we can answer for you on that, we're here to do so. Otherwise we can go through that.
Thank you, Manton. Questions? Councillor Curtin.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Manton, can I just take you to page 45, which you just referred to,
Yes.
and particularly under regional income, the HBRC dividend. You've reforecast that at 9.538, that correct?
Yes.
Does that take into account the additional request dialogue that we're having with HBRC? Have you forecast a conclusion of the extra $1 million that we were contemplating, or at least engaging with HBRC around?
No, that excludes that, any dialogue on that. So that's our original SOI figure of the 9.5, and there's 38,000 basically left over from last year's expenses, which we've also
Sure, so there's no sense of incorporating it at this point because it's too unknown. Is that
Exactly.
correct? And just further to that, if we were to contemplate it, we have an overlap of the financial years, don't we, for the port versus regional council. So you've got 1 quarter to go with the regional council, but you've got half a year to go with the port. Can you just remind me of when the port, what regime payments are made to the port, in particular relevant to this financial year for the regional council?
So the date that they pay dividends to us?
I guess
through
the bottom
HBRC?
line is, could we, in a scenario where our request is met, could we receive additional dividend in the current regional council financial year?
Yes, it's possible. We've got the final dividend is yet to be paid. That's always paid in June. So that's still to come, which is the majority of that that funding there. Obviously, there's other things to go through with your request that you're talking about, but it's possible.
And secondly, Mr. Chair, if I could take you, Manton, to the next page 46 at the bottom of the page, 9.2. Environmental incident response unfavourable 547. You see that?
Yes.
Can you tell me, is that the figure that separately reported via the incident report framework we've set up to report Havelock North Water. Is that reflective of that figure?
Yes.
There?
Yeah. So they are based off the same information. That is the staffing time and amount that we've spent on those particular items. The external costs and everything else is noted down further in that paragraph, the 826, which is the external cost, which is funded through our disaster damage reserve, which has been resolved previously.
So the 547 is simply staff costs. It doesn't take into account the legal cost overrun.
Yeah, that's correct. It's excluding the legal, and that's funded somewhere else.
And where would I find that? Is that in the disaster reserve, is it?
It is, and is a little bit in limbo at the moment in that the reserve, we are currently allowing for enough cash to pay that, and that they are shares.
And where does
so
that
on.
reserve appear in the accounts? Thank you.
In the accounts, they appear. And, sorry, bear with me. Page 56. About halfway through, there's a council disaster damage reserve there.
Must have a different 56.
It looks like this.
Oh, it's that spreadsheet.
Sorry, it's a very
Yeah.
small diagram, unfortunately.
Okay, thank
So I probably should just mention that that deficit you're talking about is really a reshuffling of our time. So some of the regional resources team that were dealing with that, we've shuffled some of that time around just to balance where our budget should be at the end of the year. So that's what we're trying to do there. So it's not that 500,000 isn't an extra cost that we are facing. It's a reallocation of costs that we are saving from other places.
Thank you, Chair. Just take you back to 45. Governance and community engagement. We had a part of our 200,000 contribution to Matatini was 80,000, and I think from recall in the annual plan it was based on efficiency gains or something. Are we on to get that, considering we have extra spending and a range of different things that sort of fell outside the annual plan budget?
Yeah, so that has all been...
It's all been factored in?
It's all been factored in, it's all been paid for now. We've paid for that. We used half of our contingency of 50,000. We've had 25 left, which we've used to partly fund the capital review for this year and things like that. So that all has been factored in.
From memory, of the 200, 120 was rated and 80 was based on an efficiency over the year. So you're comfortable that that's going to be met?
Yeah, so we did, that was passed in time to put into the annual plan budget. So we had factored that all into what the original budget was for the year.
And just another question, ironically for Mr. Palmer, on page 47, the McCain's decision, is that completed now?
Sorry, Councillor, that
Might be more
sits with Mr. Maxwell,
It
so
does.
I can't
But
give you an answer
you're the
on that.
closest looking to Mr. Maxwell on that row, so.
He is due to appear at some
Is he?
stage during the session,
Like
so
a
we
magician.
might give an answer.
Maybe I'll leave it for the monthly update, Chair. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, page 47, the appeals and objections, the withdrawal of the judicial review by Greenpeace. How did that come about? What prompted it?
A question for Mr. Maxwell, but as I understand it, that Greenpeace elected to withdraw their appeal, and all parties have agreed to carry their own costs and walk away from the appeal, presumably on the basis of some view on their behalf of their prospects.
Okay. And can I just refer you to page 52, some good news.
there is one of the scheme reserves that has managed to move from deficit at the start of the year, substantial deficit, to a surplus, and that is Land Transport Administration. And so I believe the Transport Manager deserves to be congratulated for her very good management of that business unit.
Chair of the Transport Committee should take first now for a very flash lunch.
Am I allowed to, am I?
Benton, I have just a couple of questions. On page 39 in your summary, number 3, that 97,000 favourable variance, is that on the, that's on our total operating costs against budget?
So that's our total operating costs as at 31st of March against that reforecast budget. So
The reforecast
we
budget.
reforecasted it, and as you'd expect with a reforecast, we're pretty bang on that reforecast, as the nature of them are. So yeah, that's what that's about.
Okay.
So there's a couple of things that are
So
underspent.
in fact,
but
we have 143,000 out of budget, going to page 45.
yes, that's where we think we'll be at the end of the year.
Yeah,
Obviously, there's a little bit of water to go under the bridge before then. Hopefully, we've got anything surprise-wise out of the way. If anything, it'll probably come back a bit, but we can't guarantee that. So, yeah, that's where we are.
Do you know, what are we out against the original budget? Do you have a feel for that? Or-
The original budget for the year?
Yeah.
So that page 45 probably sets it out the best. That first column is the original budget for the year.
Oh, yeah, got it, yeah.
So basically we budget to break even, so I think there was a $5,000 profit. Then we do the carry forwards from the previous year, so that's where we get to that 587 figure.
487.
Sorry, 487, yeah, great. Your accountant can't read, that's really
Bad.
good, yeah. And now we're saying we'll be at 697, so that's that difference there.
That's the 143.
So on the grand scheme of things is a minuscule percentage, but obviously we like to budget pretty tight, and we usually deliver pretty tight as well. So this is, since I've been here, the first time that we haven't been able to cover, the ebbs and flows within our budgets ourselves. Not to say that we couldn't have pushed harder to do so, but
You've had some quite large, extraordinary
exactly.
activities.
It's been an interesting year. So I mean, that appeals and objections is a prime example. Usually that 50k budget we have is ample and it's not touched. This year it's 3 times, 4 times as big due to what's going through, and we can't do anything about that. We have to do that. So
Okay, are there any other... Oh, thank you.
Yeah, just
Councillor Bell?
one question, Manton. I can't find where, but I'm sure I read somewhere here that there was $62 million sitting on deposit pending a decision on RWSS. Is that correct?
that's roundabout correct. 60, 60ish.
So I thought that the money was still actually tied up in the Wellington leasehold land. Has that now been sold?
No, sorry. There's of that 60. 12 or so is what you're talking about, that Wellington leasehold, and no, we haven't. They still exist as in their current state. We, in the annual plan, suggested and this is for the beginning of the year, that we would borrow for that amount if necessary this year, just because we were getting good returns from that investment and it was cheaper to actually borrow. We haven't actually come to that, so that's been delayed and put on. So we haven't done anything. We haven't borrowed. We haven't sold, and that money's sitting there. So
the money that is sitting on deposit, can you tell us what the interest rate is that it's in?
As an average, it's around 3.65 is current. I mean, we have parameters about when it's needed, if it's needed. So we've had to keep them reasonably short term for that reason. Obviously, that will change or may change depending on the outcomes of different things. But
Councillor, it might be helpful if I just draw your attention to page 56, and in that table of reserves funding, you'll see on the right-hand side the sale of land investment, the 55.7 million sitting there, and then further along you see the effective interest rate of 3.61, so that shows you across those different reserve funds what they're currently accruing.
Debbie, you had a question?
I did, it's not financials though. But was a staff member coming down to be available for any of the questions in the substantive
Yeah, we've contacted Mr. Maxwell, so he should be on his way. Is it particularly related to the resource management?
No, I was on pest control.
As a financial.
No, it's non-urgent. I can
As a
catch someone
financial.
over lunch.
Okay, if we have no more questions, we have a mover here. Oh, you another question?
The attachment, the non-narrative stuff?
Well, you can do.
Non-financial.
Sorry? Yeah. If they refer to the financials, do you wish to? Yeah?
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
I meant to raise another question before. I mean, on pages 42, 43, you've highlighted, well, staff have highlighted the activities that are off track. That's right, isn't it? So, I mean, as I've read it in here, it appears everything else is on track. Is that right? So, and it's most appropriate that you should do it that way, by exception. My question is, 2 meetings held per year between HBRC and NICI board. No meetings have been successfully scheduled, and I've seen that before. What is the problem?
Probably several issues. One is that we try to, the NICI board only meets, they meet for 2 days quarterly, and so we try to arrange meetings when they are available, and almost inevitably, we haven't been able to arrange it from this end. But there certainly it's been difficult to get a response at times as well to any offers to have a board meeting. So I'm not sure that there's, perhaps they don't see a lot of value in having them.
Well, I wouldn't have thought that it would have required the whole board to be in attendance.
I think the intent was to have as many as possible available, so and as similar to the number of councillors, so to make it very sort of a formal type of meeting.
Well, I mean, my final conclusion from this would be, if they don't want to meet with us, then why are we bothering?
I hate to say we have a treaty. Okay. Now, Councillor.
It takes 2 to tango.
Councillor Balfour, you want to go?
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, we're given all of this, which takes a decent hour plus to go through and raises a lot of questions. And so, are we meant to
No, you can go to the.
send them in the mail, or are we meant
No,
to discuss them?
you can
or-
go to this document and ask questions. That attachment is associated to this paper.
So the largest adjustment in the front paper here is $250,000 of unspent regional land care grants, which is within the land management function, a function on which my views are increasingly well known. But I would regard that as a non-performance, not a savings. And I was planning to raise it in this part of the discussion as part of a whole raft of questions I have about that section of this paper, but if we're not going to go there, I'll raise it now.
Raise it now.
But there's still no one to answer the question as to, how do we manage to save $250,000 by not attending to our land care function?
Perhaps I could answer that, Mr. Chairman, in Mr. Hanson's absence. The challenge with the regional land care scheme has always been it's actually about customer demand, and it would be similar, I guess, to the Heat Smart program. We rely on there being customers there to actually want to take up the product. So I don't think it's it can be not quite a guessing game. There's targets and they're well justified. But it's one of those activities where, despite our best efforts or the best efforts of the staff, it's not always possible to reach those targets, and it's not a savings as such. It's just an underspend on our part because we haven't had the farmers or the landowners taking up the option at this particular time.
So as I understand it, the product on the table is what is soil conservation efforts, and so basically what you're saying is that there is insufficient demand on the part of the farming community of Hawke's Bay to address the issue of soil erosion, and thankfully for that we saved $250,000.
No, what I'm saying is that the demand from the farmers of Hawke's Bay varies from year to year, and it's quite almost inevitably connected with their bank balance and the returns that they're getting from their operations at the time. And so while we have if you like, a consistent target that we aim for, we are dependent on them doing well to enable the whole program to do well.
So we spend it here, or we think we'll spend 600,000
Yeah, I'll go to feed
of that out of 850. So we've allocated $850,000 for that important piece of work, and we're only going to spend 600, and that's where we get the 250 in
That's what's happening.
savings.
Councillor, perhaps if I could just add an additional comment that the question of both demand and supply of interventions in this space, particularly to back end our plan changes such as Plan Change 6, tank plan changes, etc., is a source of ongoing concern within the executive, and it is our view that there are changes that will be required to successfully implement those plan changes to the Regional Land Care Scheme, and our intention is to bring that all forward as part of the work to do in the refreshed long-term plan. So part of the organisational changes that were made recently, which I believe Mr Woodham's advised the council of, is to have Mr Maxwell take over the land management functions and have a more direct focus on those and on the evolution and development of that group of functions. So the issue that you raised is known and we're aware of, and is of concern, and there's a process to be gone through now to rejig the policy settings.
Well, may I wade forward to give it the issues on the table here?
You wade forward. I think Councillor Wilson might have...
Oh, just to make a comment about planting. When there's a drought predicted, no one plants. Quite simply, they've all been burnt before, spent their money, watched it wither up and die.
That's one of the micro issues.
One of the issues there. I'm just saying it's not an exact science, is what I'm saying.
No.
May I continue?
Yes, you may, yeah.
Can I ask a quick question on off that? It comes back to the financials, I suppose. At the end of the day, what it sounds to me like is that the requirement of the fund is dependent on uptake from the farmers, and that depends on climatic conditions and all sorts of other issues. The thing that worries me is we've, granted $850,000, we haven't spent 200, whatever it is. Does that just go back into the general fund, or is that set aside in some reserve or something, so that because the following years there may be a higher uptake required?
It would just hit the general funding, basically. Yeah, unless you decided you wanted to carry that forward for that particular reason.
But still might be budgeted at the same figure.
Yeah, I think we've got an increase next year anyway, budgeted in. Obviously, that's a target area for us. So, yeah, it's one of the things that you guys can decide.
Yeah. Do you want to carry on?
Could I just, in relation to that very issue, which I also had marked in my account of it, rather than relitigating it, the issue, as I'm seeing it, has arisen year on year, and I just wondered whether it's possible to get a sequence of underspending in that area over a 5-year period or whatever it is, and whether we should be making an adjustment in the next year's annual plan as opposed to waiting until the long-term plan. Is that something we can do?
That's not something Councillor Balfour would want to do. Speak. He wants to make sure we're doing the job.
So I'll just make one or two more comments about the level of service statements here as they relate to land management, but then make a broader point about this. But in this section in particular, and this has been true of every one of these reports we get, I've underlined how much of the reporting is we had a community meeting, we had 2 meetings, we had a workshop, we had a number of meetings, We had a number of meetings. We had 3 workshops. We had another meeting. There's almost no reporting of outcomes in this section and more broadly in much of the document. What there is a lot of reporting of is we had meetings, we did reports, we had some more meetings, and we had some more reports, and we're working on it. But in this area in particular, I'm just getting increasingly annoyed that there is no evidence of anything actually being done. And one of the promises in here is that, okay, we'll get a annual report, we'll get an operational report in this land management area, which is supposed to inform us for, and we're going to get that apparently before June 30, I'm not sure when, because that's going to inform what this area is doing in the next year. And then a couple of months after that, we're going to get an annual report from that unit as to what they did last time around, which seems to be kind of an unnecessary process. If you're going to tell me what you're going to do next year, it must be based on some conclusions you've drawn about what you did or didn't do this year. I just think I don't want to relinquish our ability to have more influence over the structuring of this unit, the resourcing of it, just hand it over from this person to Ian Maxwell. Well, I'm not sure what I think of that. I guess I'm expressing a frustration that starts in this particular activity area, but it does bleed out into, a lot of these reports are talking about process measures as opposed to outcomes. And rather than having somebody laboriously put together this kind of BS, I'd rather see a 3-page document that says, here's what we've done. Is that too much to ask for?
May I say something?
Yes.
Your comments are well noted, Councillor, and in the short time that I have been in this position, the same observations have been made by a number of the staff to me in terms of reporting of outputs, trees planted or whatever, but little much in the way of outcomes. And I think with a change of CE and a change of some of the portfolios, and I'm not too sure how this works, but in terms of the long-term plan, that hopefully will be addressed, that the focus will be more outcome driven rather than output or reporting on meetings.
Perhaps I could just add that, Councillor, you might recall that last year you received papers with respect to both the refresh of the strategic plan and the next long-term plan, and those papers noted that our existing long-term plan is heavily activity-driven, does not articulate outcomes particularly well. This is a well-understood problem with the existing long-term plan, and the intention is to craft the next long-term plan in a manner which is far more strongly anchored to outcomes and is not driven by activities first and foremost. And while that's actually easy to say, having done this myself in other contexts, it is quite hard to do, particularly when you get to attribution issues of outcomes, etc. But we do have state of environment monitoring in the organisation and a significant capacity and investment around that should be telling us a picture about what outcomes are being delivered. The issue we'll typically have is the lag times between, say, planting trees and the outcomes that gives you in terms of phosphorus in rivers, and then ultimately things like periphyton outcomes. To draw all that together is a multi-decade kind of story. So there is a challenge in doing that, but it's not insurmountable, and certainly the intention with the refresh of the long-term plan is to get far more outcomes driven and get away from a lot of this really granular output and activity reporting which drives staff across the organisation to distraction, and a lot of industry within the organisation are constantly filling all that out. All that's driven by the long-term plan because we're required by law to produce these reports and report in this manner. So it starts with that point.
Just to finish, I'll just read on page 25 for your amusement. The performance target is develop a program of scheme reviews and commence review process with at least 2 schemes. The required action is, on completion of the major scheme level of service review, determine a program of scheme reviews within available resources. And the reporting of that, which is off track, program is unlikely to be completed this financial year due to focus on completing levels of service reviews for major schemes this financial year. What the hell does that mean? You know, and I hope that nobody on the staff actually thinks that we want that. It's not being done for our benefit, that's for damn sure.
Thank you, Councillor. We love that little Monty Python ending.
No, that's taken from Yes Minister.
Your points are noted. Unfortunately, we don't, and I don't know why we don't have some of our senior management staff here today, and that's been noted a couple of times, but I don't think Manton is able to, he is counting the numbers which accrue from this activity, and he's not really in the position. Councillor?
Well, just in the same vein, it does make you wonder why we're going out to the community with an extra 5% rate increase on priority hotspots when we can't tell people what we're going to do. Crazy.
We can on the priority hotspots. We will be telling them
We've
what
just
to
had
do.
it explained we can't. So why are we going out for the extra 5%? It makes a mockery of it.
Well, I don't agree with that. Councillor Bevan, and then we'll come back to you, Councillor Hewitt.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at page 30 or 31, depending on which number you want to choose.
Which document? The attachment?
Of the attachment, where we're talking about FEMPs that have been received and processed, and it suggests 50 in this document, whereas we had a workshop last week and we were told 96 were used for analysis of some work in regard to Plan Change 6. Can we clarify which is the right number?
So not my area, councillor, but from what I understand, so this is referring to plans that are eligible for the incentive. So this is the funding incentive. So the reference to 50 plans, it's there. You've got another 80 on the books coming through. As I understand it, we had received 96 at the point of the audit that was done for the review of the Ruataniwha Water Storage Scheme. That 96 will include the 50 that were eligible, and then presumably 46 that are not eligible.
I thought there was an incentive that applied to anybody who submitted their plan early.
Yeah.
It was done for specific catchments, was it?
Yeah, well, again, not my area, so I couldn't give you a definitive answer. As I understand it, the incentive hasn't actually been taken up by all people that have supplied FEMPs, which is an interesting statistics in of itself. For whatever reason, some farmers have decided not to pick up the incentive. They've just done the FEMP themselves and lodged it.
Yeah, I mean, so we had a target here of getting 250 done, and we're a country mile short of that. This is a real concern because we do have a stick this time, because I think if they are in a catchment that's above a DIN level of 0.8, they will need a consent, resource consent to continue their activities beyond 2018, I think. Is that correct?
2020 is the date that kicks in, but 2018 is when the FEMPs have to be lodged. And from memory, if an FEMP is not lodged, then you automatically go into consent whether you're in a DIN exceeding catchment or not. So the FEMP is a requirement to remain as a permitted activity.
Right. So we do have a stick here, and it's a considerable concern to all of us sitting around this table, because these FEMPs are the vehicles for delivery of an improved catchment, and farmers need to get a message that they need to take these seriously. This is not a tick box exercise by any stretch of the imagination, and I'm really concerned about this.
But can I just add to that, there are issues with service providers getting qualified, and that's a bottleneck issue in-house here as well.
Their physical availability, I think the numbers I saw yesterday suggested that a provider can do about 40 FEMPs a year. So to do what we need to do in the next 12 months, it requires something like 25 people out there in the market. I think we've got 6 or 7 sort of providers at the moment. With the best will in the world, even with our accreditation processes, we're not going to get 25 people in place running around the catchment doing that. So look, we aren't going to have 1,100 FEMPs lodged, which means that there will be a number of farmers that will fall into resource consent processes. And I guess one of the things I'd note is the recent One Plan Horizons decision has made a declaration that every resource consent for a farm requires an assessment of environmental effect. So not only will you have to produce a farm environment plan, you'll have to get an AEE undertaken, which will cost thousands of dollars, and it will have to meet the standards of an assessment of environmental effect, assessing all the effects that a farm has on the environment. I mean we are coming to a little bit of a collision course with Plan Change 6 implementation, which I think Council is well aware
So
of.
this is looking like something akin to a crisis to me, where we're asking farmers to do something, Councillor Hewitt saying they can't do it because there simply isn't the expert advice available for them to do it, even if they have the best will in the world to do it. And as a consequence of not doing it, we actually significantly magnify the work inside this office because we've got all this resource consent handling to do. I think we probably need to have a better understanding of just how big this issue is and what some of the options for handling it might be.
I think that's a correct description of what we're facing. Some of these issues will be canvassed in some depth in the review of the RWSS, but there is more work to be done around next year. I know that Mr Maxwell has work underway working that through at the moment, but you're quite right, there is a deeper discussion to have with the Council soon. And some choices about our implementation of PC6, which come with some risks as well.
This certainly does look to our capability and our capacity to do this is certainly stretched, and we thought so all along, but it's now manifesting itself, isn't it? Are there any more questions or comments around this?
Yes, well, I know the staff aren't here, but I just wanted to bring up about the active rook nests, and I wonder, Greg, if you might come back with some information about that. But monitoring indicates a downward trend, and how does the monitoring work? Because my observations are increased.
Out the kitchen window, your observation.
I know. There are a lot of crows around. I'm observing more and more, and during the treatment, when the helicopters are going around and poisoning in the spring, they were simply, a lot of the nests were just being blown out of the trees. So, how successful are we in this area? What happens when the nests are just blown out of the trees? They just, I don't know.
You can stamp on their heads.
Yeah, I'm not seeing the success that I would have thought we should have been seeing, and the noisy things at the best of times. Also, the other question is, how are we getting on? I didn't even know that you did off-season poisoning of these birds. How's our publicity along those lines?
Okay, so I think that's right. We do need a report on just how successful is our rooks program, because it's definitely seems to be an issue in Central.
And up here too, I see them.
Do you?
A fire. When I was driving through the other day on the motorway, and a fire under a big long row of poplars, and the smoke was just had all of these crows just circling around and shot them out. And
It's two things that annoy me, isn't it?
I should have taken a photo for you.
You should have. Okay, do we have any more questions for Manton? And we have a lot of questions for staff who are not here, unfortunately. But if we have no more questions, do we have a mover to on the recommendation was to receive this report for the 9 months? Do we have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Curtin. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor. Do you wish to speak further?
Just very briefly, Mr. Chair, because it was good to hear the if you like, the systemic issues that are facing us, and I appreciate the staff have got it in their minds at least, and wanting to make changes into the long-term plan, in particular delivering those outcomes we're needing. What concerns me significantly, though, is particularly in relation to the Ruataniwha Dam scheme, is that's just one catchment where we're needing to have clear outcomes produced, and it occurs to me that our capacity to do so is very substantially below where it needs to be, and we're needing to get our skates on very quickly. I think it goes to the core both of the Ruataniwha review process and our decision making around that is, how do we do this?
Who seconded it? Was it you? Who seconded that? Oh, you're okay. Are there any other speakers? If there's no other speakers, I'll move that we receive this report. All those in favour? Against? It's received. Now, what we're going to do now is we'll skip item 14 to after lunch, because I think the quick one will be item 15, Chairman's report. Hopefully you've all had a read. We do have a little interesting one on April the 14th. That is.
You are a show off. You are a show off, sir.
That's right. The mind boggles how that actually happened. I'm sure I put the school leaders group. Just to go, I spoke actually not on council matters, but on my involvement in the community to a group from Iona, Woodford, and Lindisfarne. So that is another. Are there any other issues, questions? We've already talked about our visit to Mahia.
I'm wondering, is there anything interesting in your diary in the months to come that may be of interest to councillors?
The month to come.
Well, I find it quite valuable in the staff work program. You know what's coming up, so you can have input, and I would have enjoyed seeing that in your report, Chair.
What's coming up?
Yeah.
You want to see what's coming up in the future?
Anything flagging that someone might say, I have an interest in being involved in that.
So the month of May. Well, you could be of great assistance. My wife's going to China for a month, and I have to look after the kids for a week. So I just noticed that in my diary.
You need a Roman for that.
Romans are useless at that kind of activity. So what I'll do is just one of the things that when I got this job from Fenton, it was he did hand me a very big highball, and that is chairman of the Helicopter Selection Trust. That has required me to speak to all the trustees, all the members of the selection committee, to try and get a view on how the Rescue Helicopter Trust works. It's been a big job. Alongside the HBRC selection of the HBRC directors, I've spent a lot of time, talking to people and interviewing people, including potential candidates for the capital review. But I will I'll share my diary with you. It's no problem to do that for the future. Are there any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, the April 12th meeting, Mana Ahuriri and Ian, regarding funding strategy. Funding for what?
So Mana Ahuriri have a statutory board to manage the estuary, as you are well aware. I've had 2.5 meetings, really 3 meetings with them over the last month. Our staff are applying for funds through the freshwater management fund that the government have put together, which we regard as a big opportunity. We're going to apply for funds for especially Tutera and Ahuriri. And the statutory board for Mana Ahuriri hasn't quite been completed, so we had to figure out a way to apply for those funds in partnership effectively within the given legal entities that we had. So it's been around that. It's also been around who will be our representative on the statutory authority. As you're aware, Mana Ahuriri have the chair by right, but the other participants are from Napier, and I think Hastings District might be included, and us, and we are of course a very important player in there, and we need to put the right kind of person on that board to help drive it forward and create the partnership that is required. So it has been quite a few meetings involved with them. Councillor?
Just a question in regard to lunch with Treasury CEO. You're talking about who's that?
I've forgotten his name, yeah.
From the National Treasury?
Yeah, from the Treasury.
Oh, okay.
I was invited to a lunch by the iwi chair, who had a visit from the chair of the CEO of our Treasury plus his staff, which I attended, and was very enlightening. It was a very frank discussion that we had at the meeting, so I thought it was particularly useful.
And one other chair, on that same day, it looks like, met with Wayne Jack, Shane Walker, Matariki Red's proposal. Where are we with that as a council?
I just want to go back a little bit. As I've been very frustrated with Matariki and Red's period, the whole process, and I've let it known. I understand that some of the councillors also have been frustrated by this. I think it was a dreadful process. Their intentions are very good as a vehicle to help push Hawke's Bay forward, and I have some issues with the governance, and I've told them that, and they moderated it. They were very keen to get us on board. And I took a lot of pressure from our staff that it was necessary for us to be on board, and in the end I've been convinced that we need to go for this ride, and we need to not only go for this ride, but we need to participate, because we are the only council that extends the whole breadth and length of Hawke's Bay. So I think it's really important that we go on this journey with them, and we bring out what expertise we can to the table. So I have agreed that we would do that. It was already agreed, really, that we would do that, but that I would personally take a role in doing that, and they were quite convincing, and I think it was very important for them to have us on board.
Just what are the next steps, just because this has dragged on and it has been
they have
a less than interesting process.
I could have brought, there's a graph, and James may explain this better, but so there's sort of a head organisation, or representatives from all the councils, all the treaty claimant groups, from the business sector, and they will appoint essentially what is a board of directors, or directors to manage Matariki, and there will be 3 elected officials on there. I'm not sure the further breakdown, James may clarify it, but there will be appointed a chief executive, and the existing staff will report to him or her.
That's right, Chair. So what's proposed is a leadership group that comprises 3 representatives from local government appointed by the Mayoral Forum, 3 iwi representatives appointed by treaty settlement entities, as well as Ngāti Kahungunu, 3 business representatives appointed by a Hawke's Bay Business Leaders Forum, which is a new entity yet to be established, but is in the hands of Business Hawke's Bay to set up, and then 2 central government representatives that are likely to be locally domiciled, could be the chair of the DHB, for example, and then a 12th member who would be an independent chair. So that's the current model. That leadership group will take over the governance of REDS. At the moment, the governance is comprised of chief executive level folk from across local government, business, iwi, and so that group will then take over driving the implementation of the REDS, with a new delivery entity that comprises Business Hawke's Bay, plus the staff that we currently have involved in this, which is Alistair King, who's on contract to the Regional Council to be the program leader for REDS, and the Social Inclusion Program leader, who's employed by the DHB. Obviously, the CEO of Business Hawke's Bay recently resigned, and there's a question for Business Hawke's Bay about whether or not the overall manager of this will replace her, or what else they do with Business Hawke's Bay. I mean, I think there are a whole bunch of questions on the table for Business Hawke's Bay about their future form and function, how it fits in with all of this that they're currently working through.
Sounds like the intersectorial group to me, Chair. The governance does.
Yeah, I have some sympathy with that thought, but I think we've done our best to get it so that we do actually have some governance control here. I don't think we could have done any more except say we're not going to be involved. And I think in the final analysis that would have been interpreted by our community and the government as not cooperating on a regional initiative. I was very strong on the social inclusion being added in. There's still some controversy on that because, as you know, it is my view that the biggest issue facing Hawke's Bay is in fact the risk of leaving 3,000 families behind as we have this commodity boom. And unless we address that, we're going to create two societies. And so it was that the director of Maori Health actually rang me. She's a personal friend of mine, and she convinced me also. So there's been a lot of lobbying for me, including from my wife, who said I've got to get over myself. And James almost said the same thing, so I think they were having a chat. And I think that's right, and it's quite difficult for us to embrace this, given that we were not consulted at any stage. But I think we do need to go forward on it. That's my personal view.
Mr. Chairman, who's going to pay for the so-called leadership group?
There's a structure. One of the things, Councillor, I said that we would not be happy, and I did not think our council would be happy if we had to dip in any further monies other than we are already doing.
Good.
I'm not sure I'm going to achieve that objective, but I'll put that very clearly on the table.
Surely there's some central government money coming to assist that?
There is.
Okay.
And if you stand back and think, if this group can get the 60 million or whatever the amount is required as an example to improve the road between Wairoa and Napier, then you have to say it's successful. If we can have a joint face to government, I think that will judge the success of this organisation. If we can't, then it will fail.
Yes. One more quick one. Thank you for that, Chair. Just the drainage meeting with Ahuia, with Johnny Bostock, Rangi Manuel, etc.
Yeah.
Is that an extra to the scheme, or is it something about grunting the scheme up, or is it just early stages?
Very early stages. Okay. There are, as you know, there are 5 or 6 really important horticulturalists on the Heretaunga Plains. They're running out of land. They are looking to expand principally north. Most of you will know that I've been very closely involved in trying to do something with various land blocks in Wairoa on a private side. But if we could get 1,000 hectares of pipfruit grown in Wairoa, we think that, I personally think, that that would be a big add to their community, given that the Wairoa has marvellous land, climate not quite the same as Heretaunga, but very similar to Nelson. So the opportunities are there, but they're looking at one particular piece of land where the regional council is heavily involved in the drainage scheme, and it would require a substantial upgrade in that. Mr. Adey has been working on it and has done a couple of reports for these particular growers and the landowner. It is a big, large Maori trust, but given that he was on his way and is on his way, I thought it would be useful to get Graham to meet the landowner and the principal investor and see if we could work out whether we can get this drainage scheme. If of course we do improve the drainage scheme, they have to pay. So it really is, can we add value into that Wairoa region?
Free draining land in Central Auckland.
Music to my ears,
And everyone turned up.
I'm happy to do.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Wilson. All those in favour accept the chairman's report? Aye. Time for lunch. Carried.